In 1945, we thought, at last, peace and prosperity, and everybody was working, and things were going up, and all of a sudden we started choking on what we were doing. Noble have I created thee, why dost thou abase thyself? Our destiny is noble indeed. Many people say if it could only be as it was when we were children, when things were simple. Why can't it be as it was? And I was thinking, it can't be because all the people living in those old houses have changed. Maybe the houses haven't changed, but the people have changed. And the times have changed. And there is no going back anymore.
Families. The purpose of this conversation is to talk about the progress that we've seen in the 25 years in the advancement of women and gender equality. At a time when we are commemorating the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Conference in 1995.
The UN has done what it does best, which is to help surface and raise the visibility of this issue. But it hasn't been able to do what governments and the culture has to do.
Mm-hmm. I think what we are learning within Baha'i communities is that we have to be investing in building strong, resilient communities at the local level, because that is where the lasting change, the sustained change is going to happen.
We have a goal on gender equality in the Sustainable Development Goals that also accepts and says very clearly that even though it's a standalone goal, it cross-cuts with every single other goal, and we shouldn't take it for granted or assume that this was kind of natural. It took tremendous effort.
An open letter to the women of the world from the women delegates and advisors at the First Assembly of the United Nations. We call on the governments of the world to encourage women everywhere to take a more active part in national and international affairs. This Universal Declaration of Human Rights may well become the international Magna Carta of all men everywhere.
We have learned valuable lessons in the past 5 years. The attitudinal prejudices which stand in the way of women's advancement are held by women as well as by men.
Time is short for us to rectify the present unsustainable patterns. We must achieve greater equality.
We have proposed an Equal Rights Amendment.
Those delegations who are in favor of draft Resolution 1, entitled The Role of Women in the Preparation of Societies for Life and Peace, raise their hands, please.
The women's movement is about changes in a society, about changes that are global. We want this to be remembered as a conference of women, by women, and for women.
I declare open the 41st session of the Commission on the Status of Women.
We have to give real meaning to the ideals of women's equality.
This has been a century of women's emancipation.
Beijing was something we all shared. Today, we all own the great responsibility of implementing the platform for action.
The first 63 years have been momentous.
Today, let us be clear about what needs to change.
So the World Conference on Women in Beijing in 1995 was like a springboard for many women and many organizations that were working on women's rights to help us see that women's rights and women's advancement is not a Western feminist idea, but it is very much in their culture. I was born in Malaysia. My father came from China as a school teacher. My mother was local born, a Peranakan as they call it. And like many women of that time, my grandmother had bound feet. Hers was about 6 inches. Now, the mother had bound her feet when she was an infant. And the beauty was described as a woman with 3-inch feet, walking and swaying like a weeping willow. So she suffered a lot from the binding of her feet that deformed her feet. To walk is really very painful. It took a lot of courage of my grandmother not to bind the feet of my mother. And because of that, it liberated me from this tradition of bound feet.
Yes, this is Beijing.
Oh, it's Beijing. That's Beijing.
That's Roz Harris.
Yeah.
And Virginia.
Wow. Oh.
Which one's you, Mary?
I'm not seeing you.
Here, you won't believe it, but that's...
Oh, that's you. That's right. I remember your suit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Mary.
Yeah. That's right. Oh my gosh. There's a long history of the Baha'i international community with the United Nations. And for a long time, it was one person who carried the burden, or however you want to look at it, and that was Mildred Mataheta. And she certainly was a mentor out there for all of us on the international level. That period of time was ending just as I came in, really.
So Mary will remember that when I came to the UN and she was the representative, we used to have many different agencies at the UN that were responsible for gender equality. It was all over the place and there was no unity. When the Commission on the Status of Women was meeting, it so happened that I was the chair of the NGO Committee on the Status of Women. Just like Mary had been 10 years before that. And so we decided to send a letter to the Secretary General Kofi Annan. And finally, in 2010, a resolution was passed that created UN Women.
That's so nice, because also 25 years after Beijing, now at the United Nations, they're thinking about all of the different ways of advancing this. So they're working at the grassroots level, they're also working at the national level with their governments, they're here at the international level. And we see that gender equality today is very much at the forefront of the public mind. And what's really nice is that young people are thinking about all of the different ways of advancing this. And we're seeing that happen around the world, which is really exciting.
मेरे फादर तो वो भी वही चाहते थे कि मेरे घर की भी बेटी बाहर ना निकले, लोग उसको देखे ना। और अदर कास्ट मतलब जो कास्ट था कि जो ऊंची जात और छोटी जात का बहुत डिफरेंस था, तो मेरा परिवार हाई कास्ट में आता था। और जिस लड़के को मैं पसंद करती थी वो गांव में रहते थे, और उनका जो बैकग्राउंड था, उनका रहने का तरीका था, वो सब चेंज था। तो बस मेरा एक ही उद्देश्य था कि मैं वहाँ पे जाऊँगी, लेकिन मैं समाज की सेवा कर सकती हूँ, जहाँ पे मेरे पति मुझे बराबर का अधिकार देंगे और मैं उनके साथ कदम से कदम मिला के चलूँगी। लेकिन जगह जगह पे लोग मजाक उड़ाते थे, जैसे हम लोग देर में आते थे तो साथ में मेरे हस्बैंड मेरे साथ कपड़े धुलवा ले या झाड़ू लगवा ले, तो लोग गांव के लोग हंसते थे हम लोगों को देख के, पीठ पीछे बुराई करते थे। फिर वो देखते देखते मैंने इतने सालों में देखा कि एक दिन मैं ऐसे खड़ी थी तो बगल के पड़ोसी के एक नेबर्स जो थे वो उठ के झाड़ू लगा रहे थे, तो मैं हंसने लगी। तो उन्होंने कहा क्यों हंस रही हैं आप, यहाँ पे तो झाड़ू लगाते हैं ना। तो मैंने कहा इसलिए नहीं, मैंने कहा कि मुझे लगा कि शायद परिवर्तन हो रहा, और ये मुझे देख के खुशी है कि आपने भी इस कार्य को किया।
We could see now for parents, they really believe that in terms of, for example, preparing food, they really believe that it is the women who can only do that. If they are going together in the field, the husband will only carry an axe around. But to find that the woman is carrying heavy buckets on her head with cassava, including vegetables, the husband will not help. You cannot come near to a woman who is preparing food. It was not allowed at first. So even these boys and girls who have been growing, they could see that difference. The husband would just come and shout at the woman to say, why are you not cleaning the house? Why are you not preparing food at this time? But him is just sitting like this, waiting for a woman. A woman will come from very far from the farm. She's very tired. She puts there and then start touch other things. She does this and this. And then she gives first food to the men. Her, she'll eat at last. But now men, they have come to see that this barrier that we created to see that this is for women, this is for men, it is really pulling us down. We cannot grow.
We recently became parents. Our daughter is almost 1.5 years, so that really brought in a whole new element of what housework looks like if you're striving for gender equality, what income looks like if you're striving for gender equality, what childcare looks like. For us, gender equality doesn't mean sameness, so it doesn't mean that we necessarily do the same tasks the same amount, but somewhere in there there's a balance.
I think the biggest barrier remains to be expectation of what is equality mean, and how do we as a couple and how do we as a family really address that expectation, and when it's correct, apply it correctly, and when it leaves much to be desired, how can we alter that in how we live our lives? But I think it's one of the things we've discussed a lot, where Kimia is very driven in her career, and as am I. So we say, well, how can we both succeed out there in the world as well as at home with equal voices in our marriage? Our daughter has so much joy, I think even more than the average baby. Maybe I'm biased, but she just screams with delight all of the time. And you see how women in this world are barraged with so many things and so many challenges. And so I know these challenges will come her way. For her to keep that bit of joy for herself is going to require, I think, resilience to all these challenges that come, and just having the tools to take the world for what it is and make it a better place, but retain that part of herself that is so valuable to me and so valuable to many others, I think.
One of the things that I think we both think about a lot in raising Rumi, our son, is cultivating his gentleness and giving him the space to be who he is. It has this boldness, and he has this courage, and he has this energy, and he has all these things that I know people are gonna like love and encourage about him because he's a boy, but he's full of gentleness and thoughtfulness and compassion. He's so observant. He sits in silence beautifully. He is like creative and collaborative. He loves beautiful things, and those are like these attributes that are just as beautiful about him, and I don't want any one thing to mean that he can't be the other thing.
As a Baha'i, understanding the unity of the world is something that we really hold dear, and raising Rumi is one of the things that I think I do as a member of the human race. Starting a family really feels like we're beginning to participate in a dialogue that exists across the entire world. It's not something that exists in America or something that exists in Asia. It's something that we all do together.
Nosotros como familia siempre hacemos la consulta. Siempre hacemos consulta. Entonces, a pesar que son muy chicos, hay temas que consultamos juntos, que están en su nivel de entendimiento.
Una cita que me inspira y que amo es la que dice que las dos alas de un pájaro son como el hombre y la mujer. Y cuando las dos se juntan, el pájaro puede volar fuerte. Y un ejemplo que doy es el de mi hermano, que cuando yo hago oficio, él me ayuda y así podemos progresar juntos.
Es importante porque si yo dejo a mi hermana que haga todo el oficio sola, va a terminar, pero ella tiene que hacer otras cosas. No todo el tiempo puede estar haciendo el oficio como si fuera la que trabaja acá.
जब मेरी शादी हुई 2008 में, तो पहले गांव में लोग जो नई बहू आती थी तो उसको बाहर निकलने नहीं दिया जाता था। तो मैं एक विद्यालय चलाता था, तो मैंने अपनी पत्नी से कहा कि तुम दूसरे तीसरे दिन से ही जैसे आई वैसे ही मैं अपनी पत्नी को बाहर लेके आया और विद्यालय में पढ़ाने के लिए बोला। लेकिन उसके अगेंस्ट फिर गांव वाले लोग काफ़ी विरोध किए कि अभी नई बहू है और तुम बाहर कैसे ले जा सकते हो, ये है वो, दुनिया भर की बातें लोगों ने बताई, लेकिन हमने उनको ध्यान नहीं दिया। देखिए, हर माता पिता की एक ख्वाहिश होती है कि उनके बच्चे जो हैं वो सही रास्ते पे चले। इसमें मेरी भी ये इच्छा है कि मेरी 3 बेटियां हैं और ये सही रास्ते पे चले और आगे बढ़ के समाज के लिए कुछ कार्य कर सकें, समाज में अच्छा बदलाव ला सकें। बस यही मेरी इच्छा है। बच्चों को कम उम्र से ही उनकी नैतिक शिक्षा खास तौर से और उनकी आध्यात्मिक शिक्षा पे जोर देते हैं तो बच्चे बहुत ही अलग होते हैं और वो समाज में दुनिया को बदलने में अपना बेहतरीन योगदान दे पाते हैं।
Men have to be able to contribute, and to say that it's women's issue kind of infers that men can't contribute to their betterment. But as men are often referred to, I think they must be referred to as potential contributors. And we certainly know the problems that have been caused by patriarchy. But there are men willing and ready right now to contribute in a meaningful and appropriate way to the advancement of women.
I think part of what allows toxic masculinity to flourish is actually the suppression of what might be true masculinity, you know, which is not the expression we've seen. You know, we see something that's contorted. I mean, cartoons, the sort of things that we expose our youngest people to, are full of, even just, I think, visually, these certain ideals, you know, a man with an extreme V, broad shoulder, you know, he's good for a few things, and a woman who's shaped like an hourglass who's also good for a few things. So we actually start force-feeding our youngest, our children, our babies, like tropes, more or less. And what does a spiritual perspective allow us to consider then? You know, if not that we discard the material, but we include the spiritual. So together, what kind of perspective might we have of a man, you know? Well, first, I mean, I think it's safe to say that we're still exploring what healthy masculinity is. The same way that women have been oppressed, it means a correlative suppression of what it means to be masculine. Our male-dominated structures are maybe of the latter kind. They are too rigid. They're calcified. They're hard, and therefore they will break. But what kind of strength is it to be elastic, to bend, to be receptive? You know, this reconceptualization of man and woman is also the reconceptualization of society.
I'm not sure exactly what principles boys need to learn at an early age to be proponents of gender equality, but I know it needs to be learned as early as possible. And the thing is that it can't be just one segment of their lives. You can't have their parents teaching them about gender equality and then their grandparents don't. You can't have them learning gender equality at home and then when they go out into community activities where gender equality is in practice. So the entire community has to contribute to that. And that means that everyone has to be on board. Every single person that child, that boy runs into has to enforce this ideal. And that makes the change generational.